Good afternoon. It is January 29th. It's just after 1:30. We're here as the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee. We have two items on our agenda. The first is zoning text amendment 2308, sponsored by the District Council member, Councilmember Balcom, who is with us. And we also have the first meeting of the Takoma Park Minor Master Plan Amendment. We're going to start with our first item, zoning text amendment 2308. I will turn it over to the district council member and sponsor if she would like to make any comments, and then turn it over to council staff.
Thank you. So this is a pretty straightforward ZTA, basically addressing the need for additional cemetery lots in the Ag Reserve. In creating the Ag Reserve and the companion transferable development rights program, decisions were made as to the various land uses that were specifically prohibited in land encumbered by TDRs, and one of those specific exclusions was cemeteries. And the TDR program was set up a very long time ago, and we just need to look at the evolution of the needs, and we also need to look at the future of cemeteries. And so this ZTA is very narrowly tailored to existing cemeteries, the expansion of existing cemeteries on land that is abutting the existing cemetery. The original intent of the ZTA was to allow for that expansion. We received comments to suggest that there might be unintended consequences in terms of the size of the expansion. So I am recommending an amendment to the amendment to limit the expansion to an additional 10 acres of abutting property. And the abutting property is land that shares a property line or easement line. It's well explained in the packet, and so I'm looking for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no questions or comments to start from colleagues. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Nadeau, and you can walk us through the item and the packet, and then we can take up any amendments. I can share some thoughts with colleagues on that. We can take that up at the appropriate time.
All right, Health Committee. So we had the public hearing on January 16th. We had 3 speakers who testified in support. We did receive written testimony as well from the Agricultural Advisory Committee and the Agricultural Preservation Advisory Board, who had 4 recommended changes, which was 1, excluding family burial sites, allowing the expansion only 1 time, allowing the expansion by only 10 acres, and then only allowing on property with a shared boundary. And I will address those amendments in a minute. The Planning Board also reviewed this ZTA and did not recommend any amendments and were unanimously in support. We received our 2 impact assessments. First, the climate assessment noted very slight negative impacts from vehicles traveling to the cemeteries, but an increase in community resilience by having cemeteries near where people live. We also received an RESJ impact statement from OLO, which was determined little to no impact, but did note that white persons are overrepresented property owners in the agricultural reserve, but because there's a limited number of properties this would affect, it wasn't an overall negative impact. So Councilmember Balcom went over the history of the Ag Reserve, so I'm going to skip that part. So under Section 315A4, cemetery is prohibited if it's on a lot or parcel on which the use in the AR zone is encumbered by a TDR easement. And again, there's some history of how the TDR program works in the packet. The way the DTA was written at introduction was that a cemetery, unless it's expanding onto an existing cemetery, so it's only the expansion that would be allowed. You couldn't create a new cemetery. Data from the planning department showed that while there's probably like about 90 unique cemetery sites, only 21 of them are quote-unquote active. And so that's the universe you're looking at potential properties that could use this. And then, of course, limited by how many new cemeteries we get that would be allowed in other zones. zones. According to DPS, there were only 5 commercial permits for cemeteries issued since January 2000, so it's not a use we see a lot of necessarily. Planning did note that an expansion of cemeteries could lead to a loss of agricultural land, which is what some of those agricultural groups were weighing in on, but that cemeteries are actually really unique because unlike other uses, they can't really expand. It's not like you could build up or add density, so to speak. So Councilmember Balcom's amendment, the language, which is on page 5 of the packet, would be cemetery, comma, unless expanding an existing cemetery, and the additional language would be up to 10 additional acres on an abutting lot or parcel. And we also received a letter from the county executive, I believe it was on Thursday or Friday morning, that was a very similar amendment, but added in that language about one time only. So those are the proposed changes that are before the committee at this time.
Great. Well, thank you for the packet. Thank you to the sponsor. I will say we have to be able to handle the losses that we have in our community and handle it in a dignified and a humane way. And while I don't think cemeteries are the land use that we like to talk about, that we frequently discuss, it is a necessary part of the role and discussion of land use. I appreciate the amendment that came forward from the sponsor. I think there is an additional aspect. It's really kind of a belts and suspenders from my perspective that is supported by the Agriculture Advisory Committee and the Ag Preservation Advisory Board. I know the county executive is supportive. So I would personally, I wanted to see where colleagues would be comfortable moving forward with a tweaked version, an amended version of the Balcom amendment, the sponsor's amendment that included the one-time only preference, and just wanted to see if there was interest in that from colleagues, whether council staff could explain how that would be worded.
Sure. So for some wordsmithing, it would read cemetery, comma, unless doing a one-time expansion onto an existing cemetery up to 10 additional acres on an abutting lot or parcel.
Okay, so without objection, we will amend it. It sounds like the district council member is comfortable with that as well. Are there any other outstanding items besides that one amendment?
No other items.
Anything from colleagues? All right. Appreciate the feedback from the ag community. Appreciate everybody working together to try to address this. As I noted, not the most fun topic to discuss or to think about, but a necessary part of what we do. And so I appreciate that, as well as the input from the planning department as well. Sounds like we have, without objection, we will move this forward unanimously to the full council, and appreciate Councilmember Balcom for your leadership on this issue. All right, with that, we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, and I imagine it has the same level of consensus and agreement. The Takoma Park Master Plan. Before I turn it over to the District Council Member, Vice President Stewart, who has joined us here, I just wanted to note that we, as a council, took a bus tour last week, as we prefer and like to do, so that we can be on the ground and actually see what the land use decisions are in the environment that they are in. I thought that was a really helpful conversation and outing last week, Tuesday morning, prior to council session. And then we had a public hearing on Thursday evening that was very well attended, as expected, and it was in the community, which is a commitment that I've made as the chair of this committee, that as council president, that this whole council and this committee have made, to be in the communities to particularly address land use policy decisions and master plans specifically. So that was part of that effort. I think it demonstrated on Thursday why that is an important effort that we undertake, and I really appreciate all of the residents who weighed in. We had a wide range of views on the issue, and really appreciate the engagement that we received. Today, we are going to begin our overview of this minor master plan amendment, which has had significant aspects both through the planning department and through the municipal process, because I know the city of Takoma Park has taken this up with their own related parallel process. We will have 2 additional committee sessions that we have planned. The next one will be on February 5th, and then we will have an additional one which we have now scheduled for March the 4th. So there'll be a month in between the next meeting and the subsequent final meeting. So we will have plenty of time to take additional feedback into consideration. While there is a technical date for the public record, as is noted as part of our regular course of doing business, I will also note to the public that there is always an opportunity to reach out to council members and to the council as a body via email and other forms of transmission. So feel free to reach out to our offices, as I have full confidence that residents will. And with that, before I turn it over to staff to walk us through how this is going to go, let me turn it over to the District Councilor, Vice President Stewart, and then committee members if they have anything to add. Councilman Stewart.
Thank you. I'm very glad that my colleagues and we were all able to be in Takoma Park twice last week. And, I spoke before the planning department and staff did their presentation at the council meeting last Tuesday. So I'll keep my comments brief and just want to say thank you very much to our county staff and to the planning staff who have worked really hard on this project over the last few years. This is something that started actually when I was still mayor in the city of Takoma Park, and I'm glad that we turned the challenging part of Adventist Hospital leaving our community into something that presents an opportunity for the community to really rethink this area of our city. And so I just want to say thank you for all your hard work. As Council President Friedson said, I know that the city also spent a great deal of time reaching out to members of the community and looking over this plan. And so I'm glad now that as the council, we get to do our part on it. So thank you very much.
Thank you to Vice President Stewart, District Council Member, and now let me turn it over to Ms. Dunn and Council staff. If you could just walk us through the process here, and then we can turn it over to colleagues in the Planning Department and the Planning Board Chair to make their comments and to walk us through their views, and then we can go through the packet.
Great. So just briefly, thank you and good afternoon. We are meeting on the first work session for the Takoma Park Minor Master Plan Amendment plan. We will be taking up the plan in the order in which it's delivered to us. So we will cover the introduction, the vision, the background, all the things you see in the beginning of the plan that set the stage for the plan-wide recommendations, and we will cover some of those, about half of those plan-wide recommendations today. We will cover transportation, in the environment and historic preservation. There are 3 properties being recommended for designation, so that's a very important component in this plan. And then the next work session we will cover the plan-wide recommendations related to housing and to parks and trails, and begin our work on the district level recommendations in the plan. And then at that third work session, we will finish up those district level recommendations. We cover plan implementation, the fiscal impact statement, and any follow-up or remaining issues that have come up during the committee's discussion in the first 2 work sessions. With that, I'll turn it over to someone else.
Sounds good. Let me turn it over to the Planning Board Chair to kick us off, and then we can turn it over to your council staff colleagues and move forward.
Thank you, Council President, members of the council, and the PHP Committee. I just want to, I'll have some say later on in the presentation, but I just want to say that it was very, very important to the board that this plan embrace equity and social justice. Very, very important. The board had several discussions with staff about this, and our recommendations were incorporated in the plan. We are very, very supportive of the recommendations we have in the plan. And so with that, I'll turn it over to the staff, and we'll go through this.
Okay, we'll turn it over to the presentation and start with that, and then we can go through the packet once we get through the presentation.
Okay, great. So this is going to be a brief presentation For the record, my name is Melissa Williams. I'm the project lead for the Takoma Park Minor Master Plan Amendment. And as Chair Harris stated, there was a lot of consideration given to racial equity and social justice. We carefully considered it throughout the entire process, and staff actively sought diverse voices to inform all aspects of the plan. We analyzed demographics and historical context as a part of our community engagement and outreach effort so that we could craft a targeted strategy to reach the diverse populations within the plan area. We also had ongoing analysis to ensure that diverse voices were included to better shape plan elements, including recommendations. And so what I mean by that statement is that we, as the existing conditions, we had to identify the demographics within the plan area. And so we took a look at that and we saw the varied populations that existed there, and it made us realize that we were going to have to do some things different. And that included providing for translated materials through the entire process. We also provided interpreters upon request. And we really had to make a conscious effort, especially because this took place during the pandemic. We had to, even obeying all of the social protocols, we had to make sure that we were able to meet people where they were. And so our community engagement update report, which we included in the plan appendix, reflects all of these varied forms of outreach and engagement that we utilize to reach these different demographics. And so if you want additional information on that, you can actually see the demographic breakdowns of some of the participant groups on pages 6, 8, and 13. And so for the most part, as we went through this process, we encouraged participants to self-identify so that we could actually take that information and we could compare that to the demographic breakdown in the community so that we could make sure that we were actually lining up, so that we were meeting with the people who live in the community today. So that was very important to us. The significant community engagement included traditional and non-traditional methods. It resulted in more than 500 unique interactions with stakeholders. The results of these interactions informed the plan, including the recommendations that related to housing and transportation. And I know that's something that we heard a lot about in both the planning board's public hearing and also at the council level. And so one of our biggest achievements was the canvassing effort. And I want to thank, he's not present today, but we want to thank Councilmember Jawando for participating in our canvassing efforts. But we were able to go out and meet with the residents of the multifamilies along Maple and Lee Avenues. And so that was something that was incredibly important to us because these are populations that are often underrepresented in participating in these planning efforts. We also had a very similar effort that we made with the students at Washington Adventist University. And once again, that's another population that has been typically hard for us to reach. And they were very successful. These efforts included utilizing volunteers from both the apartments and at the and university students to help us talk to their neighbors, to talk to, the other residents. And we had interpretive services provided as a part of that. So once again, we were trying to make sure that we were presenting ourselves in a way that people felt comfortable speaking with us, and also in a way that we were gathering information that we could use. And so quickly, just kind of looking at what we did the canvassing effort, and you can see that took place in December of 2021, and it resulted in more than 230 interviews. We also had the Washington Adventist University, the student-led activities that had more than 85 interviews, and then that led us into having our open house. And so the open house had more than 100 people attend as a part of that process. And so it's important to note that throughout the engagement process, residents and other stakeholders, they were very specific with us about the types of development that they wanted to see. And this included the desire for new housing types. They wanted mix of uses, specifically commercial uses, so that they could have neighborhood and local serving retail. They wanted green space, and they wanted better connectivity. These desires were consistently noted and were included as a part of our visioning effort, where we provided examples of the varied suggestions and desires that we got from the community, and we encouraged the participants to select their favorites. If you turn to pages 20 and 21 of the document that was just shared with you, you can actually see images from the Visioning Open House, and the results of those exercises are shown there. And staff incorporated these and other results from our engagement efforts into our plan recommendations. So we feel strongly that the work that we did actually reflects what we heard from the community consistently from the beginning of the process up until the planning board draft. And so just another example, as I stated earlier, all of the varied methods of engagement that we had. We also had an online questionnaire, which was incredibly successful. And that was one of our tools that we had to pull out because of the pandemic, and making sure that we were providing opportunities for not just the people that we did the door knocking with, but for people that were outside of that kind of focused area to participate. We also had community meetings that included civics and neighborhood associations. We actually included the results that one of the most outspoken neighborhood groups, one of the more involved neighborhood groups, actually did their own effort. And we attached that to our community engagement because we wanted other people to see what we're hearing from the community as well. We also had regular communication with City of Takoma Park staff and City Council, so they got regular updates. And as I stated, we translated the materials into Spanish, French, and Amharic, and we also had interpreters available at meetings where we thought we would need them, and also meetings where people just requested that we have them just in case. And so we did as much as we could, given the tools that we had, to make sure that everyone felt welcome and that everyone was given an equal opportunity to participate in the process. And what is it? It's going backwards. Okay. And so as a result, we crafted some carefully considered recommendations, and so these are the recommendations that broadly reflect what we heard from the community. They wanted mixed-use zoning. They wanted equitable opportunities for jobs, and also just places where they could shop and not have to leave the planned area. They also wanted increased mobility options, and so there was a lot of conversation about transit. And in the report, what we were hearing was not that they didn't have good transit. The concern was that efficient connection. So the idea that I can get to downtown Silver Spring, but it's not the fastest mode of transportation. So those are the things that we heard, and those are more operational. That's not something that we would necessarily address in a master plan. There was also the desire for the creation of diverse and welcoming public spaces, and we had a lot of conversation about that, and we made recommendations for feasibility studies to kind of look at the infrastructure that's in place, because there is a lot of green space and public open space in the area, but is it being used as best as it could? And so we made recommendations to address that. And then finally, we looked at ways to combat environmental inequities. And so there's a very robust section in the plan that speaks to the climate and environmental considerations, and there's also that climate assessment that you guys will get to much later. And then finally, there was a lot of conversation about housing, and I'm going to turn it back over to Chair Harris, and he's going to talk through these recommendations.
Before we go to housing, let me just turn it to Councilmember Jawando, who had a quick point on the racial equity, social justice piece.
Technically, I think we're still on it technically, but I'll chime in now and just say thank you. I was, I think, out of the room when you acknowledged our office's participation in the outreach that happened, and I can tell you I was there. It happened. It was real, and I've said this before, and I think we get better each time. In standardizing and having metrics of how we do deep engagement, right? It's never going to. I'm not going to say never, but it's hard to make that perfect because every community is different. But there are some things we can do every time, right? Like, we didn't used to do door knocking. When I started on this council, we didn't do door knocking. It just didn't happen, and now we have, and I was able to participate on this in this plan, and I do think I will say, just to acknowledge the community, and I appreciate the letter that we received over the weekend. I think that said some staff said that there was going to be a racial equity report done by OLO, just to get that out and cut. That is done for ZTAs, not for minor master plans or master plans. Certainly. If maybe in the future, who knows, but that's not that was misstated, and I think we should acknowledge that because we heard a lot of that in the public testimony. But there was a lot of work done as far as reaching out with the community. I can attest to that, and I will just say, since we have all the planning leadership here, it would be great if we can continue to improve on how we say, this is our roadmap. We're going to do these activities every time, and here are the metrics that came from them, and it can be more standardized so that the public can provide feedback on whether they think that's the appropriate level, and we can provide feedback on whether that's the appropriate level of engagement or the plan. And it could change from time to time, but I think there's some things we always want to do. So I just offer that as feedback. It's both a thanks for letting us participate, but also that I think this has gotten better and better, and we can keep getting better and better. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Let me turn to Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez.
Just very quickly on the public engagement, I would like to congratulate Melissa for her amazing work. Something that I really don't like to talk about it, but I'm just going to say it. My kids do go to Piney Ranch Elementary School and also Takoma Park Elementary, so I'm part of the PTA, and I got every single email from, telling people about, all the engagement that you guys were doing and the city was doing. I have pretty good friends who live in Takoma Park, and they kept me in the loop, even if I didn't want to. They really, emphasize the engagement that was happening. So I just wanted to uplift that because I saw it as a PTA parent, and I saw it as somebody who has strong community ties in Takoma Park. So congratulations for that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sure.
Mr. Sartori?
If I could, for the record, Jason Sartori, Planning Director, I want to thank you for those comments, in particular, Councilmember Jawando. This idea that we can always constantly be looking to improve, and I want to state very affirmatively that we are looking to do that. I will make sure that you all have a copy of our Equitable Engagement Guide that we've produced, which we see as a work in progress. It's going to always be a work in progress, and we're going to constantly be refining that to be able to do better and more equitable outreach. And I think what you'll see in this plan, the things that Melissa's talked about, the engagement, the recommendations are not just informed by that equitable engagement or the history that we know of the community, but it's also they are themselves recommendations intended to achieve more equity. And so that was certainly a focus of our attention in preparing the plan. And then I'll turn it over back to Chair Harris to talk a little bit about the equity recommendations related specifically to housing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to do the housing because I have a keen focus on housing. That's especially affordable housing. Just for the record, Artie Harris, chair of the board, for the past 22 years, that's all I focused on: multifamily development, both acquisition and rehab, and also new development. And for the last 14 years, it was with Montgomery Housing Partnership that only did affordable housing. And as part of that, I was involved in either acquiring or redeveloping several properties in the metro area, and I know what's needed for affordable housing. And so I'm so proud of what the work Melissa did in the outreach, and from what the council wanted. We came up with several recommendations, and we really pushed to listen and get those recommendations. And summarizing them, one was just kept hitting over the head: no net loss of affordable housing. So you see that in the report, all through the report: no net loss of affordable housing, prioritizing existing residents, minimizing displacement, diversity of every unit type so that larger families have a place to live, smaller families have a place to live, preservation of the number of existing affordable units. That was a big what the community wanted, and that's what we really hammered in all throughout the report. And upgrading affordable units, because Takoma Park has a very old housing stock, over 60 years old. There's been a lot of disinvestment in many, and there's not much incentive to upgrade those, and it takes a lot of money to do it. Mostly the affordable housing developers have done it because they can go out and get tax credits, but for-profits typically don't do it because there's not much incentive, and the properties are sold. They need so much money. So that was a lot of our recommendations in the plan. If you look on report 78 through 79, it's very detailed, but much of the housing stock is very old, needs upgrading, and we heard the residents, and that's one of the major recommendations we have in the plan. So and then we also propose new development. with a lot of affordability because the community needs that development, and that also helps to upgrade some of the older units. So lots of recommendations. Please look at pages 78 and 79. And also, one of the things the board did do, we'll talk about the historic preservation. The staff did a lot to propose putting certain things on historic designations, and we asked staff to do more in expanding the community history because we thought that was so important to get out there. And so that was also expanded on in the plan. So we feel that we've done a lot and around racial equity and social justice, and it is shown up in the plan, and we're open to more questions you may have, but I'll let Melissa continue with the presentation.
Okay. So,
Transportation stop, and we'll turn back over to
okay, this is the transfer. This is the
racial equity.
Okay. Yeah, so as I stated earlier, Melissa Williams for the record, as I stated earlier, what we heard from the community is that there is transit access, but it's not taking them efficiently to the places that they wanted to travel to. And in a lot of cases, it was specifically about getting to the employment centers like downtown Silver Spring. And so what we have here is the slide that literally shows the transportation access, the proximity to the Metro Rail stations, also the proximity to the planned or the future Purple Line station. So that would be Takoma, Langley Crossroads, and Arliss. And at one point, if you're in the Erie Center area, you're about roughly a half-mile walk to the transit, the Purple Line station at the Takoma Langley Crossroads. We also have a MARC line that's shown on the map, and then there's multiple buses and shuttles that run through the plan area. So if you look through the community engagement report, you can see that there wasn't a lot of conversation about transit because transit access, but those conversations that were had were related to kind of operational issues like timing. And so, like I said earlier, those are things that the plan isn't kind of empowered to address. We also, because we saw that we had this existing infrastructure, one of the things that we thought was important was to make recommendations that kind of knitted all of these things together. So we have this kind of major transportation infrastructure pieces that are just outside the plan area. And so we made recommendations to better connect them, utilizing both bike lanes and pedestrian paths. And so the goal was to increase mobility, increase connectivity, and we were also really looking to get people out of their cars. So I know there's a lot of conversation that talks about congestion and more cars on the road, but the plan's proposition was, what can we do that would encourage people to leave those cars parked and actually use some of this other kind of transit infrastructure that the county's put in place. And so we felt that one way to do that was to make sidewalk improvements, make bike improvements, recommend that green promenade, which would connect the three districts and connect to the existing trails that we have that kind of traverse the plan area. So that ties into the idea of equity and making people that are more likely to have to utilize transit and utilize not have cars, make it easier for them to move around. And now we have transportation analysis and Pam. Okay.
Yes. Okay, so we just wanted to provide the committee and anyone that's watching with that broad overview on the racial equity and social justice and peace, because we have heard a lot of the comments that were at the public hearing, and we know there was some concern with whether there would be an analysis or not, or what the status of that was. So we've tried to cover here the thorough engagement that the planning department undertook and how that is incorporated throughout the plan, throughout the recommendations in the plan. And we'll continue to talk about that as we review the plan. This isn't just this overview and that will be it. But with that, we're going to turn to the staff report so that we can go through at least some of the plan-wide recommendations today to get them before the committee and to get your view on whether you want to support them for the transmission to the council. So you'll see in the staff report As always, we typically try to paraphrase or at least present in a very condensed version the things that are in the plan for the public, so that if someone's not going to read the whole plan but they turn to a staff report where we're reviewing it, they know what is in there. And so you'll see in the beginning we cover background information about Takoma Park, the community history of Takoma Park. This is important because it does set the stage for those master plan for historic preservation designations that are in this plan. There's the section on equity, and again, it is a good piece of the plan puzzle that talks about where throughout this plan equity was thought about. And it is in housing, it's in the different types of housing that are being recommended, it's in mixed-use zoning for commercial and economic and employment opportunities, and also for access to parks and green space and environmental equity. And then there is mention of the community engagement and references to where that can be reviewed. And all of these things together come together, and they set the plan up, the planners have set the plan up in sort of three themes, which are reimagined, reconnected, and a resilient community. And that's sort of how we'll go through the plan-wide recommendations. So in the first one, the reimagined community starts with land use. It has a broad statement about land use, but really the decision-making pieces of the land use will be covered in those zoning recommendations, and we will cover those under the districts because that is where those are located in the plan, and it makes a lot of sense. We will go literally through them map number by map number. With respect to public facilities, we're on page 4 of the staff report. There are public schools in the area. There's the Piney Branch Elementary that is in the plan area itself within the boundary. And the plan makes recommendations related to these different public facilities. And the first one is schools. And it notes that as part of the analysis, and it's detailed in the technical appendix, that there is enough capacity at the schools for what the plan is proposing. So it doesn't spend a lot of time talking about the need for school sites or an inadequacy of facility types, but it does bring up Piney Branch Elementary, as you saw on the tour that we took. It is in the plan boundary, and the community is concerned about it. It is one of the smallest elementary schools. It is on a very small site, and the community wants to see what will happen with that in the very near future, if possible. And the planners listening to this basically took a very broad approach to say you could rebuild on site, or you could build within the plan area, or you could build outside of the plan area. And with all three of those different options, depending on what the council through its budgeting and MCPS with its programming decide is the best path to take, the plan provides these broad recommendations related to any of those three options. And those are in the middle of page 4 on the staff report. Council staff reviewing all those, I think it's thorough and great that they provided something related to all three, because it doesn't bind the future council or a future school board into any one path, but does provide guidance on what the community would like to be considered as they move forward. So staff recommends that the committee support these recommendations. I can read them out, or you can see them all verbatim listed on page 4.
Yeah, I think, let me turn it over to the District Council Member, Vice President Stewart.
Great. Thank you, and thank you for this. I just want to reiterate what the Mayor Searcy said during public comments. Not for here. I think what is presented here in the minor master plan amendment is fine, but the need to revisit Piney Branch is huge for this community and has been an ongoing issue. And so the city was fine with how this ended up in the minor master plan amendment. I don't have any changes to suggest, but I just wanted to lift up that as a council, we are going to have to come back to Piney Branch.
Important point on the schools piece. You have the chair of the Education and Culture Committee here who hears it loud and clear. There's also the pool, which we know is an important community resource and is directly tied to that. We know that the planning department heard loud and clear just how much the community relies on that as a public facility, an important recreational health and wellness and gathering place. And so I just wanted to acknowledge and note that as well, and turn it over to the chair if you wanted to chime in quickly.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, appreciate the district council member's point. I think many of us have been in Piney Branch, and it's one of the, we have 211 schools. We just had our first CIP discussion in the E&C committee, where we're asking for starting that process of how that's prioritized. It's always difficult, but I think this gives enough flexibility in this document for what, and then we can have obviously the concurrent process with MCPS on how to make sure that that school, that area, those public amenities are meeting the needs of the community. So really appreciate the point.
Certainly education access is probably the singular most important, along with housing, to racial equity, social justice. But I will say public pool access, if we talk about the history of racial equity and social justice movements throughout this country's history, access to public pool facilities has been a key area of that, and Montgomery County is, part and parcel to that, is at the center of that. Glen Echo Park comes to mind, but there are other examples of this as well. And so I know it's not lost on any of us here, and just wanted to acknowledge that as well. Let's continue.
Great, thank you. Then the plan moves forward and talks about fire, police, libraries, and recreation as other public facilities, either adjacent to or within the plan area. They note that the fire rescue service is adequate in the plan area. And for parks, libraries, and recreation, the plan makes the following recommendations that you'll see at the top of page 5. One of the primary recommendations that comes through is this idea that the city look at, and the plan recommends co-locating of facilities whenever possible. A lot of that has to do with the small size of the plan area and the benefits of co-location, whether that happens on the Washington Adventist campus site in redevelopment or Piney Branch Elementary School, for example. But it is one of the primary things that's in the recommendations on the top of page 5. Council staff didn't see any amendments needed to this language and is looking to the committee to see if you also support the language moving forward.
Okay, without objection, let's continue.
Great. The next section is related to historic preservation, and this plan is ambitious. I mean, a lot of plans will come to you recognizing historic resources, but not making a designation for the master plan for historic preservation. And this plan makes 3, which is really exciting. If you read through the plan, there's a lot of information about each of these properties. There's a lot of information also in the appendices because the designation of these properties requires a very specific process that goes through the Historic Preservation Commission. Certain documentation needs to be provided, and all of that accompanies this plan so that the committee and the council can, if they do approve of all this, these things will happen at the same time. It will be an amendment to the master plan for historic preservation. The first of these is Hefner Park Community Center and its relationship to the African American community and its longstanding value as a place to have recreation in the community for those residents. Way back in 1959 when it was built by the city, and preserving it today is very special. The Kress House and the Sligo Seventh-day Adventist Church are both related to the Seventh-day Adventist community in that area. The Kress House to practitioners of medicine that lived in the house, and then, of course, the church itself. Again, I could go into a lot more detail if you want, but there's a lot in the plan itself, and there's a lot in the appendices related to these resources, and staff suggest the committee support these recommendations.
Council Vice President Stewart.
Great, thank you. I just want to say a huge thank you for this section of the minor master plan, the staff's attention to the history of the area, and really particularly lifting up the history of the Hill and the Hefner Community Center. It is unfortunately a history that not many people know. In recent years, the city has undertaken with the Takoma Park Historic Preservation Group to really look into that and document the oral history, because we still have residents who are living, and so we want to make sure that we capture that history for the community. And reading through the minor master plan and our own staff summary, I just want to say thank you very much for pulling that all together, and it's wonderful. Just to say that have the historic preservation for Hefner is, I think, really important. So thank you.
Appreciate that. It's always a balance when we're talking about land use policy decisions of historic preservation and ensuring that we understand how we got here, and that's very important to me personally. I know it's important to all of us collectively, with the need to have land use that supports new residents, that supports the future, that addresses some of the challenges, some of which we're not so proud of in our history. And that's a delicate balance, and I think Takoma Park is an example of that, where there are some important historic dynamics within the community. There are also some historic challenges of things that we wish hadn't happened in the past, and we think we can do better moving forward. And I think this master plan in many ways encompasses both of those. So I appreciate those comments from Vice President Stewart. Let's continue.
Great, thank you. If you turn to page 6 on the staff report, you'll see 2 additional recommendations related to historic preservation. These aren't for designations per se, but they are recommendations that the plan has, so you are approving this language at the bullets. And it is to study, to do further study, which is always an amazing thing, because again, we have a great historic preservation staff that do great work. What comes out of it will be educational for all of us. And this doesn't tie the council or anyone to the results of a study. It just says we recognize that there's just so much still here to do, and these are the things we'd like to consider looking at. So council staff suggests the committee support these additional recommendations for study. Just like to call them out.
Sounds good. Without objection, let's continue.
Great. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Kenny now, because we are going to talk about being reconnected, which is transportation.
Thank you. So starting first with the Green Promenade, this is the central through line of the transportation improvements in this plan, connecting the entirety of the plan area through 4 gateways. The first and southernmost being the municipal gateway by the library, the community center, and Piney Branch Elementary. The second being the Sligo Creek gateway by the Sligo Creek Park and Trail and Parkway. The Carroll Avenue gateway, which will serve as the entrance to the future to be enhanced public spaces on the Washington Adventist University campus. And the Flower Avenue gateway, which will connect the Washington Adventist campus to the Erie Center neighborhood retail, the Long Branch Trail, and surrounding communities. I want to flag that the plan for the Green Promenade, as documented in this plan, is what planning is calling a kit of parts approach. So if you turn to page 41, you'll see lots of, while this is planned to be one cohesive through line throughout the plan area, what it exactly will look like is not prescribed by this plan. Rather, the plan provides a sort of a menu of options for amenities and other elements that could be included in a Green Promenade that would be implemented eventually. So if the committee has preferences on which elements of that kit of parts it might prefer, this is a venue where you all could do so. But otherwise, my impression is that would sort itself out in development review and as these things would be built in the future.
Appreciate that. I'm going to suggest if there are feedback.
I'm just going to add one thing.
Please, let me try.
Sorry.
No problem.
I do think it's better to leave it as is, because the City of Takoma Park is also going through a Maple Avenue connectivity project right now, in which they've received NDOT funding, and they're looking at a bikeways project and doing all this. So I feel like this is something that we should let the city make the decision on.
And that has been echoed by planning as well. That is, yeah.
Okay, well, I think there's, it seems like there's some agreement there. They have their own apparatus to do public input and public engagement, and I think we should be mindful and respectful of that. I think it's a good overarching framework, and the implementation will be, we'll need some more public input to occur, and that process will happen. So let's continue.
Great. So moving on to the bicycle network element. So the bicycle elements are documented pretty well on the map on page 44 that provides a good overview of what the plan is suggesting. The plan builds off of the City of Takoma Park's Maple Avenue connectivity project, as Councilmember Stewart noted, with 4 additional bikeway improvements planned on a couple stretches of Maple Avenue, as well as bikeways on Maplewood Avenue and Flower Avenue. These are documented in the plan, and you can take a look. And happy to talk about any individual ones. But we could also dive further into this as we talk, more localized in the district level discussions.
Yeah, I'd recommend that we wait until the district level discussions and talk about more localized. I will note, I think it's important, and I'm channeling my Vice President Stewart, District Council member, former mayor dynamic here. All the roads in the plan area are either state highway or are municipal roads managed by the city of Takoma Park. So our role here is a bit higher level, but ultimately the implementation of bikeways and roadway changes, state highway and municipal government, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, yes.
So I think it's important to acknowledge. I think we should, address, district level by district level, point by point, and understand what the recommendations are, because I think it's of interest to the public, and this is a forum to do that. But ultimately, I think let's keep it higher level for the purpose of this, which is intended to be more of a policy-based overview.
Good to know. And sounds like that approach is also relevant to the pedestrian network piece. The high-level policy element being proposed a full ADA sidewalk network throughout the plan area, safety improvements at all intersections, reducing driveway vehicle entrances along Maple Avenue to reduce conflict, and 3 new public pedestrian connections where feasible, those being the pedestrian trail to connect Hancock Avenue to Jefferson Avenue, a pedestrian trail to connect Geneva Avenue to Maple Avenue, and a pedestrian and bicycle trail to connect Maplewood Avenue west of Flower Avenue to Maplewood Avenue east of Greenwood Avenue. So mostly high level as well, although a couple that will be more relevant in the district level discussions.
Yep, I think let's wait for the district level discussion for the more specific dive into that.
Great. And finally, or not finally, we move to the roadway network section. The plan does not recommend any new public roads. Instead, the plan recommends a number of I don't have to get into all these unless you'd like me to, but these more specific recommendations are all in order to bring the plan area's roads into compliance with the Complete Streets Design Guide.
Great. I don't see any comments. Let's continue.
Great. Moving on to transit. As planning noted earlier, the plan area is fairly well served by nearby WMATA rail and bus service, in addition to ride-on bus routes that run directly through the plan area, as well as planned 2 future Purple Line stations. Therefore, most of the plan's transit recommendations are upgrades and furnishing bus stops that are currently unfurnished, and making access to those bus stops ADA compliant by adding shelters and seating, as well as noting on the Carroll Avenue gateway in the Green Promenade. The plan's vision is to have that be a corral and center for navigating the area's various micromobility as well as transit options. So that looking to be sort of a hub of the area's transit options going forward.
Great. I don't see any specific comments. Let's continue.
So moving on to the policy area transportation analysis. The plan conducted a transportation analysis based on the Silver Spring Takoma Park policy area as considered in the 2020 to 2024 growth and infrastructure policy. This was done, and the plan noted that the recommendations are adequate to serve the targets set in the growth and infrastructure plan for that policy area. It lines up pretty precisely with those recommendations, given that this plan area is smaller. That is the scale of it is not large enough to impact the transportation analysis of that larger policy area. The planning will speak further to that. And that is relevant also to the non-auto driver mode share section, which is consistent with the 48% build-out goal for Takoma Park as part of the growth and infrastructure policy.
David, did you?
Okay, why don't we start with planning?
Good afternoon. David Ansbacher for the record. I am the Acting Division Chief for the Countywide Planning and Policy Division. So as you see on your screen, since 2020, the department has been operating under direction to provide the five metrics shown up here in support of each master plan. Adequacy is determined based on whether each metric shows an improvement from the baseline being the approved plan, 25 to 30 years into the future for the so-called parent policy area. So for this master plan area, and maybe we can show the map, the policy area is everything shown here, south of the Beltway, east of Rock Creek. Early in the process, so I think as council staff had noted, the Takoma Park Minor Master Plan Amendment area is a very small segment of the overall policy area. It represents about 3% of the land use in the overall area. So early on in the process, the team reached out to then council staff, Dr. Orlin, and sought concurrence on going with the analysis that was used for the Silver Spring Downtown and Adjacent Communities Plan. So that's what we've been operating under. And frankly, the idea behind that, again, is the land use in this one area is pretty limited compared to the overall parent policy area. So any sort of change in the Takoma Park plan area would have to be substantial in terms of the transportation metrics to even register a change. So we felt comfortable going with the Silver Spring Downtown and Adjacent Communities analysis.
So circling back to those last two items in that reconnected section, the transportation analysis and the non-auto driver mode share, you have any further questions, or now's the time to comment on those?
I don't see any further questions. Let's continue.
And I'll turn it back over to doing the rezoning.
Sorry, hi, I'm Haley Peckett. I'm the Deputy Director for Transportation Policy from MCDOT. I am new. This is my third week, but
Welcome.
I'm very glad to be here. And
It's good to see you back here.
thanks. Thank you, Council President, and thank you to colleagues in planning. I just wanted to bring up, I definitely appreciate the need to leave implementation to the cities and this idea of looking at the larger plan area. But at DOT, we have noted that because there's so much new development and density coming to this area, and while we are within a larger shed of a lot of high frequency transit, the actual local bus service here is not quite at a level of service or frequency that can fully support this using the non-auto mode. So we think there's a lot of trips that could be added, and just want to be able to see more of a value capture mechanism to make sure that the infrastructure can keep up and meet the demand of trips that are coming, particularly through transit and other non-auto modes.
So is there a specific suggestion that you're proposing, or?
I think we're just looking for acknowledgement, like a value capture mechanism, so that we could say when the development comes, there's a way to fund additional transit service beyond just bus shelters.
So, I mean, it sounds like coded language to say that there should be staging of housing development.
I don't think we're. I'm
trying to understand.
I will get back to you on more specifics,
Okay.
because I don't have something beyond that. Don't want to commit to that.
Got
I
it.
don't think that's what we're asking
All right,
for.
the department's points are acknowledged. If you could share more specific feedback, we have plenty of opportunity at this point, well beyond the county executive's, time period to weigh in before the committee is going to finish its work on this plan. And so, if you have specific suggestions, let us know. But I do think it's important to acknowledge that the county executive proposes a capital budget. Many of the things that you're mentioning are related to capital budget items. And so we look forward to hearing from the executive on his specific proposals and DOT's specific proposals in order to address that. And my hope would be that it isn't resistant to housing, but it's supporting the infrastructure that we all would hope that we need, better transit options for everybody in the community, and certainly something that I know that we share a commitment with the executive branch on. Let me turn it to Vice President Stewart.
Great, thank you. As was noted before, since these roads are city roads or state highway, when I was mayor, most of the burden and the expense was borne by the city in terms of this. So I think it's also important to note that the city does have certain plans already in place, and I hope as MCDOT is doing any analysis, that's taken into consideration. So for example, for bus stop shelters, the city had a very robust process we went through a few years ago, putting a racial equity lens on how we fund and the placement of our bus shelters. So we actually have a plan in place in the city of Takoma Park moving forward on bus shelters. So I think if MCDOT is going to provide further analysis on this plan, I ask that you meet with the city of Takoma Park and make sure that what they're doing on the city roads are also taken into consideration in that analysis. Thank you.
Appreciate it. And as noted, we have 2 more work sessions coming up, and certainly if there are specific recommendations, we can take them up at the appropriate time. But appreciate your role here and hitting the ground running 3 weeks into the new job, and welcome you in your first official capacity that we have seen you in since, although we know that you've been working since we saw you last.
Thank
Did
you.
I see Director Sartori?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. I just want to also highlight some of the other context of things that are going on right now. We are in the process of updating the growth and infrastructure policy, that quadrennial update, and some of what I'm hearing is maybe there are some things there that we need to consider in that context. So, as you recall, the plan, the growth and infrastructure policy requires us to evaluate for any project that would generate more than 50 peak hour person trips. It would do a local area transportation review, which looks at pedestrian, bicycle, transit, and vehicle needs in the immediate vicinity of each project. And so when that development comes, we have that opportunity. And I know what I'm hearing is that maybe on the transit side, we only look at bus shelters, but maybe there's more that we need to look at in that regard. And so this is a good time for us to be getting that type of feedback from our partners at DOT to be able to see what we can incorporate into the plan the policy that we bring to the council later this year.
Appreciate that. I just will note, we have been moving away from the moratorium style policymaking in Montgomery County, particularly the last council, this current council. And I think it's important because that's why I mentioned it sounded like we were moving towards staging, which is a moratorium style policy that we have enthusiastically abandoned for the reason that it exacerbated the very problems that it was trying to solve. And I just want to make sure, as we have these conversations, and certainly transportation, transit access, the adequacy of public facilities, including schools, are essential. But to cut off housing and revenue that would help to fund the very priorities that we want, is not, to me, an appropriate, policy response, and I don't think will, help address the problem and the challenge. And I think we have partially gotten into these challenges, particularly with the housing crisis, because we didn't view housing as infrastructure too. And housing is infrastructure. We need the other infrastructure as well, but housing is infrastructure. And the kind of country club mentality where new residents have to pay an initiation fee that is higher disproportionately to existing residents in order to earn their way into having access to a community is not fair. And we have very intentionally tried to move away from that mentality and the policies that came from that mentality. And I think it's very important in this plan and in all plans, in these policies and in all policies, that we acknowledge that as well, because I do think that many of the housing challenges that we face and the broader equity challenges that we face are a result of that, where those who are here get a certain benefit, but those who don't have access to being here, wherever here is, in the room, in the community, in the place, in the neighborhood, on the street, have to pay a higher disproportionate share that they don't have a chance of ever being able to afford or access. And I think that's just a really key area that I wanted to note. Councilmember Joanna?
Appreciate the conversation and welcome again. And I know you're like, oh, what did I say or what did I do? But yes, please come back. What was the term that you used? Something capture. Value capture. Okay. Yeah. So I think I know what that means, but could you explain it?
I will get back to you on specifics
Okay.
so I don't dig myself into a hole that I didn't mean to, but I don't think that there was any intention in my understanding of phasing or trying to prevent. I'm just trying to understand so that we can make sure that there's appropriate infrastructure to support the new growth.
And I say it not to ding you, but just to say, like, you know, it could mean a lot of things. I'm not familiar with that term as a term of art. I'm sure it has a meaning. But, you know, if you're saying, and you'll get back to us, that we want more development because we want more housing and we want more people to be able to come, and we obviously want the people who are there to be able to stay, but we want the infrastructure to be able to, including in this context the transportation infrastructure, to be able to sustain it. I think, and that in order to do that, there might need to be some capturing of value to make. I want to know what that means in that context. I was intrigued by the concept, but also I appreciate Mr. Sartori saying, as part of the, I was going to say SSP, as part of the growth and infrastructure policy, looking at more things is a good thing, and making sure we understand. You know, I think you all often hear from communities, we just want to show us how this is going to work in our community, even over time, and what are the expectations of what we need to do as a community collectively to make sure that we can support our residents in all ways. And I think being upfront and honest about that is good, and because it creates expectations and puts it on us as policymakers and to do what we say we were going to do. So I'm glad we veered down this path and look forward to hearing any more ideas from either planning or DOT.
Can I just make one more comment? Elza Heisel-McCoy, Chief Down County Planning for the record. I think this was a conversation that we had throughout the plan process many times. How are we looking at traffic? How are we not looking at traffic? And I think it's important to clarify that every development project that comes in will have its specific transportation impact assessed and mitigated with that. And the planning board will not be able to approve a plan that does not mitigate the traffic it generates. And that's the person traffic, that's bike traffic, that's vehicular traffic. And so I think, you know, at the plan level, we look at the policy, at the application where we have the specifics. What exactly are we talking about? We'll get into this when we get into the site specific, but the Adventist campus is a 40-acre site. It's not going to develop all at once. We hope it will develop over the 20-year life of this plan. As projects come in, they will be assessed, and those impacts will be mitigated by the developers on a private dollar.
Important point. There are a lot of layers here. There's the policy layer and the implementation layer between the council and, you know, at planning, project by project. There's also the state, county, and municipal layers of, you know, who's responsible for what and who actually is going to implement these things, and ensuring the engagement at the municipal level, given that's where a lot of the public engagement and the on the ground decisions and implementations will be made. And I'm told that they pay for it, although we've worked hard recently with your support to share in the funding and resources in the best way that we can. With that, appreciate the comments. Look forward to any additional feedback and specifics related to those comments, and let's continue.
Great, thank you. We're now on page 9 of the staff report, and we're moving into what is the resilient section of the plan. It really focuses on the environment for the most part. I will just note before we get started in this that there is a climate assessment for the whole plan area. That climate assessment involves looking at many things: land use, the environment, transportation, everything. So it's not covered in this resilient section because it really affects the whole plan. So it will be covered in a future work session. I just wanted to make that clear, because as you listen to this and you listen to me cover these recommendations, you might want to weigh and say, well, why aren't we talking about the climate assessment? And we will absolutely cover that. You heard about it at the public hearing. So with that, we are going to just focus right now on page 9 of the staff report. And you have before you the recommendations are bulleted again, and things are broken up into different categories. And the first one has to do with extreme heat and tree canopy, because as the plan notes, one of the most challenging things for Montgomery County with respect to climate change is going to be extreme heat, and then followed by increased precipitation and severe storms. So those things are going to be what are the most challenging as we as a county move forward. And with respect to the extreme heat, the plan makes a recommendation for the tree canopy goal. As you can see, it says here that the cover for the plan area currently is about 43%, but on developed properties it is as low as 26%, and that the city itself has established a goal of 60% tree canopy coverage throughout the entire city of Takoma Park. And so then you see these recommendations at the bottom of page 9 that really reinforce what the city is already doing. The city has also endorsed the plan recommendations by approving in a sense, the plan, but you see they have to do with tree canopy, plantings, ways to reduce the urban heat island temperatures, implementing cool streets and streetscaping. There's, if you turn on to page 10, there's further recommendations that are focused on new construction and percent of coverage, green cover, it's at 35%, and then bullets on how new development can provide that green cover. Staff's reviewed it in respect to other master plans that this council's recently passed, and suggests that the committee support these recommendations.
Don't see any objections. Let's continue.
Okay. The next area that the environment section focuses on is carbon sequestration, which is the process of capturing and storing atmospheric carbon dioxide, and notes that forests, trees, and woodlands are the best form of carbon sequestration. And then in the middle of page 10, you'll see multiple recommendations related to how the plan can support the development of landscaping that does contribute to carbon sequestration. Is there any?
Without objection, let's continue.
Then we're continuing on at the bottom of page 10, and here there's a section on water quality and stormwater. And again, noted similar to the discussion on transportation, that within the boundaries of the city of Takoma Park, the city regulates and permits the stormwater management for private development. But with that, the plan still makes recommendations to support the practices of the city and the county as well. And you'll see at the top of page 11 the recommendations that the plan puts forward to do just that, to help ensure that stormwater from any new development and the water quality are protected in the future of this plan.
Good example of the interplay between municipal and county, and appreciate the working together and collaboratively, it appears here, to address the city, which has very ambitious climate goals, as does the county, which we appreciate. So let's continue.
Great. The next section is on building and energy, and again, it notes that in tandem with the city's goals, that it puts forward recommendations that will help to reduce carbon emissions to help meet the net zero carbon goals by 2035. Do you have any questions on any of those recommendations as written?
No,
Council
no,
staff supports.
No objection. Let's continue.
Okay. And then the last section is, well, second to last, is food security, and the plan has just small recommendations related to food security. The council staff did have just one brief minor edit to that on the top of page 12. The plan recommends, it says make commercial food kitchens, food processing, and rooftop farms permitted uses in the plan area. Just modifying that to say support commercial food kitchens, food processing, and rooftop farms throughout the plan area. If there's no objection by planning staff, those are already limited or permitted uses, so it just makes it clear that the plan really just wants to support that those occur. That's okay. Okay.
Without
Any
objection,
questions?
let's continue.
Okay. And then last, we have environmental equity. Again, the plan spends lots of time, and you heard about a lot of this at the Brochures Run part of our tour, looking at environmental equity. And on the middle of page 12, you'll see two further recommendations that really relate to that and support that in the plan.
Let me turn it over to Councilmember Jawanda.
Sure.
Thank you. Appreciate that. One of the more interesting everything's always going to be interesting in Takoma Park. That's one thing I love about it. But one of the more interesting testimony we received was related to the Sligo Creek and just all the work that's been done over the years to make it cleaner and better. And this just triggered it for me. Along with development, obviously, always comes things that aren't necessarily good for the environment. Obviously, we're working to mitigate that in a lot of ways that we discussed. The earlier sections on the buildings, how they're built, and our BEPS legislation that we did on requirements. But I just wonder if could someone from planning or anybody talk about the work that was done to make sure that we're keeping not only Sligo Creek, come on down, and all the streams that access there, just as clean as possible. And obviously this is a portion of it, but I know there's other work that you've done in the plan. So if you introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. For the record, Tina Schneider. I'm the environmental planner for the project. And so I'm going to be able to answer some of your questions and not all, or part of your question. So the recommendation for abiding by the city's stormwater management plan or program will enable that all new development will comply with stormwater treatments. And right now, in the existing plan area, there's hardly any stormwater management. Right. Just a few at the intersection of Maple Avenue and Sligo Creek. There's one little one, and it doesn't take nearly the quantity that there is right now with the rain event, with rain. And so every new development will be treating water that's no longer treated, which will then improve the water quality to Sligo Creek. And there's been a lot of stream work that I know about that Park and Planning has done, but I don't know the details of it. So they've put in additional stormwater management upstream of Sligo Creek, and that improves the water quality in the plan area. And they also have done some stream mitigation, and but I don't know the details of that. Oh, okay.
Look at that.
Right. Chuck Hines, Department of Parks, for the record. Our aquatic resources staff have spent a lot of time talking about and developing plans for improving the water quality and the ecological benefits of the Sligo Creek stream. I am not an expert in this, so I can't really respond to your question, but at the next work session, I can be sure some of our aquatic resources staff are here if you want to have a conversation with them about the efforts that the Department of Parks is putting into improving Sligo Creek.
I appreciate that. I think.
I'm sorry. I would
Go
also
ahead.
just add, Councilmember, excuse me, that when we get to the site-specific recommendations, there are site-specific recommendations for the Adventist site, Adventist campus at the top of the hill, to minimize environmental impacts because they are right at the top of the slope and they could potentially have the greatest impact. So that adds the strength of the planning board's requirement to find master plan conformance to the city's commitment, to the department's commitment, both planning and parks.
Appreciate that, and thank you for that offer, take you up on it, and thank you for also pointing out that by putting newer buildings you'll have the opportunity to put things in place that aren't in place now, and so that's an important.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead,
Oh.
please. No.
Okay, I just want to. Right now, we've been there, and so we've seen the amount of copious asphalt that's there, and it's not getting any treatment right now. And I did want to add. Brashear's Run, that outfall that you've seen that is at the intersection of Maple Avenue and Sligo Creek also. In the plan area, there's a recommendation to, and the city is working on that right now, work with parks to do mitigation for that. So the discharge will be even cleaner than it is right now.
Thank you. Mr. Harris, did you have something to add?
No, she addressed what I was saying about there's so many surface parking lots that will plan to be built over to provide more housing, and that all that runoff that would have gone over those parking lots will be collected and treated. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, appreciate it. I'll just note, and I appreciate the acknowledgement on the bus tour. We were brought, and Tina very specifically talked about the grading and the stream banks and some of the challenges. You can literally see, trees that are going to be taken down due to erosion. As they're literally falling into into the water. You can see them moving in that direction, and there's a lot of reinforcement that needs to happen, both to protect the trees, but also to address runoff and other dynamics. So there's a tremendous opportunity to improve the built environment as it currently is, and obviously, while there have been major benefits because of very intentional work by the city and a lot of volunteers and a lot of very engaged local residents who are deeply committed to Sligo Creek, which is amazing and we're very appreciative of. The reality is we need major changes to the stream banks and to the built environment, including on currently private property, in order to make some of the improvements that are necessary. And my hope would be, and I know it's shared, that this plan helps move us in that direction where the changes that are made are done in a way that is much more conscious of the natural environment and of the impacts on Sligo Creek and beyond than were 50, 60, 70, 80 and beyond years ago when some of the built environment was developed in the first place. Madam Vice President.
Sorry, I can't not talk about Sligo Creek considering that's where I run. And I do want to thank Parks. I mean, over the years, especially the slope coming down from the hospital site has been really a problem. And I appreciate all the work that you've done there. And, just to say that, when we went out there, and Tina, you were able to talk about this area. As we're talking about equity and racial equity, I think it's really important we talk about Sligo Creek in this part of it and how much it is used by our local community. And we're working on it. Parks is working on it. But I am really excited about this part of the minor master plan amendment that really highlights the work that we need to continue to do there so it remains usable by members of our community. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Hear, hear. All right. Well, we could talk about stream restoration of Sligo Creek all day, I'm sure, but we won't. Why don't we continue?
That was the last section for today.
Anything else that you have that we haven't had an opportunity to cover?
I don't think so. Does planning have anything that we didn't cover? Like I said, just a recap, we will come back to you on the 5th of February, and we will talk about the plan-wide housing recommendations. We'll talk about plan-wide recommendations related to parks, trails, and open space, and we will start to dig into those district-level recommendations, just depending on time, how far we get.
And then we'll come back, on March 4th.
Right. Implementation, climate assessment report, fiscal impact statement, any follow-up that comes out of these, any correspondence that we feel like we need to highlight for the committee, we'll bring that forward.
All right, so it's more than 2 months between now and that third
More than 1 month.
Work session. More than a month, excuse me. More than a month. Yeah, month and a half. Okay.
January is long, but not that.
Yeah, exactly.
Feels long.
The weeks feel like months. Yes. With that, appreciate everybody's work and engagement here, and we are adjourned.